I discovered my brother's stash of porn under his bed when I was 8 years old, and I thought, this is how I'm going to escape into a wonderful world where I'm loved. And so all I have to do is make myself as attractive and lovable as possible to women, and that's my way out. So I started going through her stuff, and I found an old telephone. I found evidence of years and years and years of infidelity. I discovered that she was working the SLAR program. She had a double life, yes. Today, I have a relationship today that is a healthy relationship.
Hello and welcome to 12 Steps and 12 Questions. My name is Silvio and I'm an addict. This pod is full of personal and inspirational stories of recovery from addiction. And in every episode, I'll ask each guest the same 12 questions about their life, addiction and recovery. Quick warning, there will be some graphic descriptions and a healthy amount of swearing. For this episode, please welcome Eric. Hi fellow 12-steppers, welcome to this new episode of 12 Steps and 12 Questions. We're continuing our journey through the wonderful world of 12-step recovery programs. And today, we have a fellow from S-Anon with us. Eric, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Eric. I'm in my late 40s. I have been in the S-Anon program for about 5 years. I'm also a member of other fellowships. I've been sober in AA for 3 years, and I'm working on the food in OA at the moment. I've sponsored about, 25 or so people, men and women, in the S-Anon program. Maybe half of those have gone on to finish their 12 steps and sponsor other people. And I'm very pleased to be here.
Wonderful, Eric. Thank you so much. Let's start and get to the first question that I ask of the 12 that I ask each and every guest on this podcast. Our first question, Eric, did you have any adverse childhood experiences?
Yes, so I came to the United Kingdom as a refugee from a war zone. There was a war in which my parents lost their homes, and my brother. We came to the United Kingdom. I was about 4 years old. At that time, my parents were severely traumatized, as you can imagine, after what had happened. And they didn't get help, unfortunately, for the trauma that they'd suffered. There was already addiction in my family. My grandfather was an alcoholic, a very violent alcoholic.
Right.
And also on my mother's side. So what this trauma did was it exacerbated the disease that was already there. It made it a lot worse. My father was very violent, and I was left-handed as a child, but I was told that being left-handed is an aberration, and I was beaten and forced to use my right hand. I had a propensity for an interest in arts. I was told that you can't make money as an artist, that you have to do something that scientific in order to be able to make a living in the world today. And it was all very, the home was very much about being functional, trying to beat some unknown enemy, some unknown foe. That was very much the sort of the atmosphere in the house. Extreme discipline, no having fun, no playing, anything like that.
So the war continued inside, really?
So my father would watch the television and can follow all of the news about the war zone. That was basically what he did 24/7. He would shout at the television. And then in the evenings, we would not be allowed to stay because other programs would come on that he would watch that we would not be allowed to see.
Yeah.
And my mother would spend all of her time in the kitchen eating as much as possible, trying to not be present for what was happening in the home.
Mm.
So it was that kind of an environment. I discovered my brother's stash of porn under his bed when I was 8 years old. For whatever reason, I don't know why, I did not become a porn addict, but what happened was I looked at that and I thought, this is my ticket to happiness. This is how I'm going to escape into a wonderful world where I'm loved. And so all I have to do is make myself as attractive and lovable as possible to women, and that's my way out. And that's how my S-Anonism, if you like, began.
Sure. Did you If I may circle back very quickly, do you write with your right hand or your left hand today?
I write with my right hand today.
Yeah.
It's not something that I've sought to try to change or explore yet, but there are lots of things I'm starting to sort of pick up. Poetry, music, that sort of thing, and today, and trying to reintroduce that into my life. But so
you must
fun.
be multi-talented one way or another. I don't think there is a hand with which you could make me write that would make a mathematician out of me. But I suppose growing up in a proxy war zone, so to speak, prepares you for a lot of fighting. And it sounds as if this was an adrenaline-fueled household with loud doors banging and a lot of tension in the house at all times.
Yes, exactly. When I was a teenager, I think it's fair to say I was a rageaholic.
Right.
There are times when I'd actually ripped the door off the hinges. So yes, it was a very violent, angry, and painful. Obviously, underlying all of that is an incredible amount of pain.
Yeah. Do you have any other brothers and sisters?
Just one brother, 8 years older than me, so I would always lose the fight. But that's.
When I think of that generation, it pains me a little bit sometimes to look at it with them having no tools available. And I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, which is a little bit of an unfortunate pun. But nonetheless, was your father ever able to get any peace?
I think he is more at peace now than he ever was. But it is still painful to visit them because that dynamic is still there.
Yeah.
So to the extent that it's possible in recovery today, obviously I show up for my parents as best I can, and I don't allow myself to be triggered in the ways that I used to be.
Of course.
But it's sad. It's sad to see them the way that they are. One of the things that I think about in recovery is that each of us are some, if you like, of our parents and everybody that came before us. And so I've had the opportunity to heal them in some fashion because they are a part of me. And when I think about it that way, it gives me some comfort.
Yeah. I think this forgiveness, and again, I'm just going a bit towards really what usually happens at the end of the podcast, but nonetheless, what happens with recovery in the 12 steps is we find some sort of forgiveness for, in my case, for my father in particular, who had his own struggles, and I wasn't really able to appreciate that and really see that. And he had no method really of dealing with it because it wasn't available to them in that generation because of conditioning and because of awareness and all of those sort of things. So thank you, Eric. Thank you for sharing that. Our question 2, and you sort of alluded to it a little bit, of what led you to your S-Anonism.
Yes.
Which is a word I never thought I'd say, but there you have it. I'm glad it came out the right way. Our second question is, we'll tweak it a bit, but the second question, what did the moment you first got hooked / the fun times, what did that look like? So most often, not always, but most often there is some sort of escapism that is involved. We grow up and maybe, not always, but we grow up in places that are uncomfortable for us. We want to get away, certainly from the way we feel, sometimes from the actual environment that we're in our heads. And there's different ways of doing that. Sometimes it's substances or behaviors or both. And you were alluding to it, you found your brother's porn stash and that this paved the way. So how did that manifest then? Obviously you were very, very young then. How did that show up?
So I knew that the only way my parents would allow me to leave the house would be if I got into a good university, and that university was far enough away that I couldn't stay at home. So I began working extremely hard at school in the sciences, which is what my parents wanted. And eventually I got a place at a top university in the UK, quite far outside of London. And I also knew that at university, staying in halls, obviously it would be possible for me to have relationships without my parents getting in the way, as it were. So this is what I went for. This is what I worked really hard for and was excited about, because I thought that was going to be the answer to my happiness, to what I was seeking. So I got into university and got a girlfriend. As an Anon, unfortunately, what happens is that we're attracted to addicts. So the girlfriend that I got was not an alcoholic. Well, I suppose it's a matter of opinion. She wasn't drinking, but she hadn't worked a recovery program. And what happened was that her disease reappeared in the form of sexaholism, as I realized today, but at the time I didn't know that. And so she was a medic and I was a physicist. And so our relationship looked like a 5-year science experiment in the female orgasm.
Right.
So it was pretty heavily sexual. It was, and I thought that sex was the most important sign of love. That's one of the symptoms of an S-Anon. So I thought I was being loved. I thought I was in this amazing relationship. I thought I was with somebody who loved me and wanted to be with me, and I was happy. I thought I'd found my nirvana. I thought I'd found my escape from life. I was going
these
to,
were the good times.
yes, I was going to take her into a house and shut the door and be safe from the rest of the world and live happily ever after. That was that was what I thought. Unfortunately, that was not the case. I don't know if you want me to carry on.
No, I was mesmerized actually. So please do carry on.
So eventually, I discovered that I wasn't the only person that she was having intimate relations with. I don't know that we could call it intimacy, sexual relations with. And that devastated me, because I thought this meant I wasn't loved and I wasn't lovable and that I was not worthwhile and that there was something wrong with me. I didn't appreciate that she was doing what she was doing in her attempt to escape from whatever trauma she had suffered. That's not an insight I had at the time. So then I tried the geographical solution. I thought, well, all right, I'll have another relationship with a different person. Maybe I'm too thin, maybe I'm too fat, maybe I need to earn more money, whatever it is. And throughout the years, I tried I got married, I got divorced, I got a job earning a lot of money. I did all kinds of things to try to find some way to fill the emptiness that I felt inside, the loneliness. When I was a child, I would often stare out of the window, sometimes when it was raining in my house, and wonder why I felt so empty inside. And throughout my adult life, I was looking to fill that emptiness with something.
Sure.
Relationships being the main thing for me as an S-Anon.
So if we slow this down just a tad, and there's so many things in there, there's so much to unpack. If we return to your first relationship that you mentioned, here you are in this relationship. You must have felt, we always talk about this like you had arrived. Would that be true to say that?
I was derived. How do you mean by that?
No, like you had arrived.
Oh, had arrived. Oh, yes. Initially, I did. I felt like I'd arrived. I felt like I'd found the solution to all of my problems. I did start to realize that there was an absence of intimacy in the sex.
Yeah.
And that is something I noticed. I tried to speak to my friends about it at university, and they couldn't understand what my problem was.
And for the uninitiated, if you're happy to talk about it, how did that manifest? How did you notice, and what did you say, for instance, to your friends?
Well, for example, what started out, if you like, as vanilla sex turned into, that there was porn, that there were sometimes other people involved. And I tried to talk to my male friends about this, and they thought that I was living the dream, and they couldn't understand what my problem was, and they thought there was something wrong with me. And because men are supposed to like that sort of thing, men are supposed to be up for that sort of thing. But it's actually not the case. And I think it's a big fallacy in society for people to think that the stereotypical view of men as, to quote a famous singer, sex machines,
Yeah.
it's not actually true. And certainly for me, it became very painful to live in that sort of an environment, to have that relationship.
And perhaps another way of asking would be, is what was lacking?
Connection. It being used like a piece of meat is not, if I've had a bad day, that doesn't make me feel better.
No.
Or if I'm struggling with something I'm concerned about, it's nice to be able to sit and chat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a really interesting, and there's so much in that, of course, with male conditioning, what men are supposed to be like, what women are supposed to be like, by the same token. And I want to caveat this just a little bit, of course. The book speaks very clearly about this as well, that we're not the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. This is a sex-positive podcast in that respect. Everybody's most welcome to get up to whatever feels good to them and is consensual. But it is still true that we have to live according to what goes on in our hearts and in our minds. And it sounds as if what was happening didn't really fulfill the needs that you had.
Yes. So when you get the chips on your sobriety anniversaries in Alcoholics Anonymous, it says, "To thine own self be true."
Indeed.
And I was being dishonest because I had an idea that she would be what I expected her to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what she was. And I had to accept that, rather than try to make her what I wanted her to be, or to try to judge her in some fashion. And that is how the disease manifested in me. I was, in the same way that I'd worked hard to get to university so that I could have this thing that I wanted, I was still trying to control, manage, and fix the situation, which is very much symptomatic of an Anon disease. And I think that's so. In step 10, we learned that if I'm disturbed, no matter how unreasonable somebody else is being, it means there's something wrong with me.
Yes.
And so I put myself in that situation, and I expect, rather than accept, that things aren't the way that I wanted them to be.
Absolutely. I suppose one could look at it from the outside, and maybe this is what would have sort of driven you at the time without the knowledge. I mean, if I look back at my own story as a cocaine addict and alcoholic, is a lot of the time I just didn't really have the knowledge. There's delusion and there's ignorance, So I suppose at that time you might have not had any awareness around this to begin with, and then also you could look at it and I suppose just kind of go, oh, she just wasn't the right person for you. We move on, right? This could happen to anyone. Then there doesn't have to be any addiction involved. There doesn't have to be any Anon involved for that to happen. But then things carried on.
Yes. Underlying that belief that I needed another person in my life to make me whole, to fill that emptiness inside me, was low self-worth. It was a belief that I was not worthwhile or lovable.
Right.
Again, that's very much an S-Anon. It's in the S-Anon literature.
Mm-hmm.
So if I believe I'm not worthwhile and lovable, then I don't move on, because I think that I'm somebody who's perfect for me can't possibly exist out there. And I can't possibly be loved by somebody unless I am making up for something that I lack. And there's this kind of secret bank account, if you will, that I have to keep full. I have to either pay for something, or I have to do something that will make up for my inadequacy in order for the other person to love and accept me. And so that is what kept me trapped in a situation that was obviously unsuitable.
Yeah.
And for somebody who's not an Anon, it's impossible to understand why anyone would stay in such a situation. In the same way that if you're not an alcoholic, you simply can't understand why anyone would drink despite the fact that it's destroying their lives. It's the same sort of thing. Why would you stay in a relationship that's obviously destroying your life? And that's very much the Anon manifestation of the spiritual malady.
Sure. And of course, this is where our third question sort of comes in, which is, what were your worst consequences? And finally, your rock bottom. Now, bearing in mind, I say this every time, this may sort of cover quite a large period of time, but nonetheless, you said then earlier that you had sort of you'd go on to geographicals and other relationships. So how did it progress?
Right. So having finished university, I did a PhD. I was a research scientist for a while. I got into the finance industry. I worked extremely hard. I got myself into a position where I was earning a lot of money. I got married. My first wife was exactly the same, porn, all the rest of it. Ended up having to get divorced.
Because of the sex addiction?
Because of the complete lack of any interest in me other than an instrument to give her what she wanted physically.
Right.
And also to pay for things. I was just being used, basically.
Yeah.
So I got divorced, and then
how long? Sorry to interrupt.
sorry.
But how long was that relationship?
3 years.
3 years.
3-year marriage. Obviously, I'd known her for a bit longer than that. So a friend of mine wanted to help me, a friend from university. He was frustrated with the fact that I kept having these relationships. So he introduced me to the world of pickup artists. So I started training, in how to pick up women and all that sort of thing, and learned all these little subtle ways of manipulating people and stuff like that, and what you say and how you break into a group of people and all of that.
Which is a really interesting topic perhaps for a different podcast,
yes.
I suppose. Funnily enough, actually, I read a couple of books on this when I was in my 20s. Looking back at it, I think it's a little bit sad, actually, if anything.
It was. Well, I think the hilarious thing in my case is that it worked. I was very good at it, but the types of women you're going to pick up in this fashion are obviously going to be more addicts. But I worked out. I got really fit. So I was this young guy in my 30s, very fit, earning a lot of money. You didn't really need a lot of skill to pick up women in that sort of pickup artist world when you had those kinds of attributes. But still, it's completely the wrong way of going about finding a partner. And of course, I didn't know that at the time. So I met someone and started having a relationship with them. And because I'd already been divorced once before, I thought, no, I'm really going to make this work. So self-will kicked into overdrive. And I tried absolutely everything. I tried living in fancy places, going on fancy holidays. We moved to Singapore at one point. She wasn't happy. We came back to the UK. She wasn't happy. I did absolutely everything I could. Eventually, we ended up getting separated. She had very serious mental health issues, depression. I stood by her. I paid for all of her medical bills. I did absolutely everything I could for her. Eventually, she went back to her country of origin, which is not the UK. And round about that time, COVID came in, lockdown came in, and I got this funny feeling from a conversation with her that something was not quite right, that she was maybe cheating on me. I hadn't realized at the time that might be the case. So I started going through her stuff, and I found an old telephone, and I found evidence of years and years and years of infidelity. I discovered an old big book. I discovered that she was working the SLAR program, and she'd crossed out drinking and wrote acting out, hooking up, me texting an old boyfriend, all of that. And that was really my introduction to the world of 12-step. I read her big book, and that was the first time I'd ever read the big book. And I was in such a state of an adrenaline that I ended up reading the entire thing in one sitting over a period of about 3 days, interspersed with crying on the floor and getting up again, and not eating anything. I lost about 4 kilos that week, and I was in lockdown, so I really had nowhere to go and nothing to do. I went through everything. I found an old step 4 that she'd done, listing everybody that she'd slept with and all the rest of it. I went through my work diary and I cross-referenced all the dates and everything to find out all the times where she told me she was going to go dancing or she was going to meet a friend or whatever.
So effectively, she led a double life.
She had a double life, yes. 1 minute I was living in a house with, that the relationship was on the rocks, but I harbored hopes that she would come home again one day. And the next minute, there were pictures of strangers on the wall, and it wasn't my house anymore because I'd spoken to a divorce lawyer about what my options were, and they said, well, you're going to lose everything because having been with her for so many years, the law really doesn't care whether there's infidelity or not. You're just going to lose your home. So one minute I had a job and a house and a wife, and the next minute I was living in a place that didn't belong to me with pictures of strangers on the wall.
Yes.
And that happened literally overnight.
You must have felt, amongst many other things, humiliated.
I think humiliation didn't come until later.
Right.
What I felt in that moment was an incredible pain that's difficult to describe. It was a pain I felt at a deep spiritual level. It was like my insides had been ripped out. And I realized that I thought I had a solution to the emptiness inside me, the spiritual emptiness inside me, and I didn't. And so the question was, well, what am I here for? As a scientist, I thought, as it says in the We Agnostic section of the Big Book, that we come from nowhere, life is meaningless, and we're going into nothing. That's what I believed.
Yeah, me too, by the way. This when I read this, I felt so, this is perhaps at a different point in the pod, but nonetheless, this really spoke to me because that is exactly the way I felt about it. Yeah.
So if that's the case, and the place and the world is full of people who cheat and lie, and what's the point of being here?
Yeah.
What's the point of living? And that was, that got me to the point where I'd considered suicide.
Which brings us, of course, to our question 4, which is, did you ever want to die? Did you consider suicide?
Yes. So I thought there's just no point in carrying on. I might as well end it now. And so I Googled, I live on the 4th floor in a penthouse apartment, and I Googled, what are the chances of killing yourself if you jump off the 4th floor? And the answer came back 50%. And that wasn't quite high enough.
That's not a lot, no.
No, and of course, today I know it's actually technically the 5th floor because I have a 2-level penthouse.
Right.
Had I known that, I might have actually tried it because the numbers are much more favorable. But obviously that was God. I realized today that was God. And I felt completely defeated because I couldn't even kill myself. I couldn't divorce her without losing my house. I couldn't. It was just. And I remember getting in the bath because it's just one of the few things you could do in COVID lockdown. I got in a warm bath and I just felt that warm feeling wash over me, and that was the first time I felt how much of a relief it was to simply let go. And that was my first experience of detachment. A couple of months later, I got an outreach call from a fellow in the US. There's a male S-Anon group in the US, and he called me up because I was the only one awake. It was very, very early morning his time. And he said to me, I am in the basement car park of my wife's acting out partner, and I have a shotgun, and I'm going to shoot him, and then I'm going to shoot myself. And I thought I'd better do an outreach call before I did that. And I was about 3 months into program. I knew absolutely nothing about S-Anon. I didn't know about literature. Yes, obviously I'd read a bit. And I was completely ill-equipped to handle that situation, but God does things for a reason. Yeah. And I said to him, well, I don't know about any of that, but what I know is that I tried to kill myself 3 months ago, and I'm so glad I didn't. And when I said that to him, it must have been what he needed to hear, because he put the gun down and he went home and decided he was going to give the program a try. And I must have heard what I needed to hear, because I thought, no, this is not going to beat me. And that's when I really decided I was going to work the program, I was going to get better, and I was going to move on.
How did you find out that there was such a thing as S-Anon? You read the big book, obviously. You found out your then still wife was in SLA, and you embarked on this program. How did you come about it?
If you're enjoying this podcast and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe.
So my mother-in-law was an alcoholic, and my wife at the time had been to Al-Anon.
Right.
So I knew that she was going to work an Al-Anon program, and she had in fact invited me to Al-Anon meetings to go with her as well. And so I'd been to Al-Anon meetings, and ironically, I identified more with the alcoholics that spoke at the open Al-Anon meetings than the Al-Anons themselves at the time, which I think is funny today. But I just wasn't ready to hear that message. People were talking about God and all that sort of thing, and that wasn't for me. So I turned away from it. But I knew that Al-Anon was for partners of alcoholics. I didn't realize she was working SLA because she kept that secret from me, and it was perhaps easier for her to do so because when she said she's going to a recovery meeting, I just assumed it was Al-Anon. But when I discovered she was in SLA, I thought, well, is there a similar sort of sister program, if you like, a program for partners of sexaholics? So I wrote down Al-Anon for sexaholics, and Google came back with S-Anon. So I wrote to the World Service Office and I said, is there anybody who's willing to sponsor me? I think I need to be in S-Anon. And they gave me the number of a guy in northwest London. I was very lucky. He's still my sponsor today.
Oh, lovely.
Fantastic sponsor. It was exactly what I needed. And that's how I found out about S-Anon and began my S-Anon recovery.
I'm always in awe when I hear stories of the program in action like that, why it is that we do service, why those people, on the helplines, do what they do and we do what we do, for that person to come in when you're at your lowest, and to be directed and guided,
yes.
By He who guides it all. Our question 5, what other methods did you try to get quote unquote sober before finding the rooms?
Right. So as we talked about it before, there was a time when I was doing something like 2 hours of exercise every day and 3 hours at weekends. I was running 10K, doing an hour of weights and swimming 2 kilometers all in one session. I was ridiculously fit. I was working in the finance industry, earning 6-figure salaries. I was going on expensive holidays, fancy restaurants, drinking extremely fancy, expensive alcohol, eating fancy food, there was one time when I dated a Russian catwalk model. I took her to the Oxo Tower and she was wearing nothing but a fur coat and a bikini. And I was, all these men were sort of looking at me thinking, how the hell did that guy end up in that situation? And I thought this was going to make me happy. I thought I had made it. I thought I was at the top of something. But of course, I was drowning and not realizing it. And I had made all these things my higher power, money, food, sex, relationships, alcohol, job, whatever, validation. I was desperately seeking. Today in hindsight, I look back and I realize there is a spark of divinity in every single one of us, I believe.
Yeah.
And when I'm separated from God at birth and I have that emptiness, that darkness inside me, I need God's light to fill it, but it's possible to get waylaid. It's possible to mistake the spark of divinity in another person as what I'm looking for. And that's how I would describe it at a spiritual level, what that malady was in me.
And speaking of divinity, our question 6, when you came into the rooms and came to the program, did you struggle with the word God?
Yes, I did. As an agnostic, I didn't believe in God. I thought there was no evidence for the existence of God. And so, but I was so desperate that I was willing to give it a try, because what else did I have?
Yeah.
And I realized today, I'd already been taken to an Al-Anon meeting and I turned it away. So I realized that it was only something as severe as that would have brought me to my knees and would have made me open to this idea that maybe there was something missing in my life of a spiritual nature.
Sure.
Scientists, during the astronaut program, thought that you just needed you just needed proteins and carbohydrates and all of that, and they discovered no, actually, in addition you need vitamins, and in addition you need trace elements, and people realized that in order to sustain a healthy body, you need more and more things than might be immediately apparent. And I think it's just a matter of time before our society realizes that in order to sustain a healthy soul, that you need a healthy spiritual life. So I came to believe, slowly, as it says in Appendix 2 of the Big Book, there are different kinds of spiritual awakening. The S-Anon one was a slow one, but I would like to just mention the AA one.
Yeah.
As part of the things that I tried to fix my marriage, I did a renovation in my apartment, which went terribly wrong. It was a renovation that she wanted, and that she'd brought her interior designer friend to do, but that went horribly wrong. I'd lost a whole bunch of money. Builders had smashed my place up, stole a bunch of things, and left. And I was left in an apartment that was just rubble. And that's when my drinking took off, and I started drinking more and more heavily to try to escape that painful situation. And I realized that I needed to ask for help with my drinking, and being in S-Anon, I realized AA was going to be the answer. But I didn't think God was going to work, because, God's all very well for psychological things like codependency and all the rest of it, but this is a substance here. We're talking about physiology and science and chemicals and neurons, and how's God, God is just this wishy-washy concept.
Because it's more tangible, I suppose?
Well, as a scientist, I still had that doubt in my mind. I thought that God didn't really exist, and it was a psychological hack to try to try to get myself to stop obsessing about another person. But I got down on my knees in that rubble of my house, and I said, God, please help me to stop drinking. I don't want to drink like that anymore.
Yeah.
And I'd tried everything. I tried I tried quitting for 90 days and all that sort of thing, and I just ended up drinking again. But on that day, in that rubble, I got down on my knees. I said that I'd sincerely asked for God's help. And in that moment, it was like, the Bill Wilson moment. I had the sun come out from behind the clouds.
Yeah.
That was the last day I drank.
Right.
That was 18th of June, 2022.
Well done.
And I can't tell you, I have no explanation for how that problem got removed, other than to tell you that it was God.
Yeah.
So I'm very lucky, because I had two spiritual experiences, the educational variety in S-Anon and the kind of Bill Wilson moment in AA.
Yeah. As close as we'll ever get to a white light experience, I suppose. Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for sharing that. Our question 7, how do you experience your higher power today? You've just shared a real God moment there, but, maybe now that you've been in recovery for some time and you've been sober and abstinent for some time, how do you experience your higher power on a daily basis?
I think I'm becoming more and more aware of what's in the S-Anon literature is sometimes referred to as God incidences. I am much more open to the universe, if you like, if you want to put it that way. So I think I have nieces and nephews, and they are very comfortable with things like TikTok and Facebook and all that sort of thing.
Sure.
For me, I'm a little bit older. I can do email, and for my parents, they struggle with email. So you ask the question, how does God speak to me in my life? Well, God is the most ancient of beings. And so God is going to communicate in the most ancient of tongues. And for me, that is the language of the heart. You know, when I stroke a cat or I hug a dog, none of us can communicate in any verbal way, but we understand each other perfectly. All God's creatures speak the language of the heart. You know, if I want to know whether my wife loves me or not, rather than snooping and checking if she's cheating and all of that, all I have to do is take her hands into my hands, look into her eyes, and tell her that I love her. And God will show me everything that I need to see. And so I realized then that my entire life is one long conversation with God, and the language is the experiences that I have along the way. And so I see this physical life as a spiritual experience with God. And there is a purpose to it. I believe it's a spiritual battle. We can go into that more later if you want, but
no, let's go into it now. I think, now's as good a time as any. How do you mean that? I'm interested.
So I think that this physical existence, in the big book, there's a section, everyone knows about the famous chapter on acceptance, but afterwards, Dr. Bob talks about how Shakespeare said all the world's a stage, and he says that there is a bit of good in the worst of us and a bit of bad in the best of us.
Sure.
So that line between good and evil runs through every human heart. And so the manifestation of this physical reality, I believe, is a consequence of a spiritual boundary between good and evil. And so to be in this physical existence is to be in the midst of that spiritual battle between good and evil. And the St. Francis prayer tells me my job description, where there is darkness to bring light, where there is injustice, forgiveness. So the whole point of why I'm here is to try to take the good, the evil, and through loving and kind actions to bring the good into being. And so everything bad that happens isn't a punishment or a misfortune. It is an opportunity to bring God's grace into this reality. And when I look at my life in that way, and I know that, like with all spiritual battles, like with all battles, the bows and arrows of this battle are trauma, tragedy, betrayal, injustice. And so we fight this battle, and at the end of it all, we go home. And so that's what my relationship with God looks like today.
Lovely. Thank you, Eric. Our question 8. Which parts of the steps were the most difficult for you?
Step 4 was a challenge, and I don't think anyone will be surprised to hear that. I had a lot of resentment and vengeance in my heart in step 4, and once I'd got past the grief and the shock and everything, I got to a place where I thought, well, I'm earning good money, and I'm going to get a hotel room in downtown central London and bang hookers 2 at a time and see how she likes it, And as I sat there looking at the sort of escort websites and trying to decide which woman I was going to choose, I thought to myself, I'm doing exactly what an SA would do.
Sure.
And that's when I realized that my ex-wife, was an S-Anon too. She'd been abused as a child. She never got the help that she needed at that time. And that resentment and bitterness twisted her and turned her into an SA.
Yeah.
And I realized that if I had forgiveness was for me, to save me from going down that dark path, because resentment was a mechanism by which the disease is transmitted. Something bad happened to her, and she hurt me, and then something bad happened to me, and here I was looking to hurt someone else. And so I realized that letting go of that need for revenge and promoting healing instead was the sacrifice that God was demanding of me, because it served a higher purpose and a higher power.
Yeah.
But coming to that realization was tough, because letting go of that anger is not...
I was just going to say that these are beautiful words, right? Put a little bit of music underneath, and you get all the clicks on YouTube or wherever, that you might want. But in that moment...
Yes.
If your experience is anything like mine, it doesn't feel like it.
Not at all. Carl Jung said, ego always experiences an encounter with the divine as a defeat.
Yeah.
And that is how I felt.
Yeah.
I felt defeated. I felt angry The reason I felt angry was because I knew that going down and acting out with these women and having threesomes or whatever the hell it was, I knew that wasn't going to make me feel any better. And I was angry that that wasn't going to make me feel any better. I was angry that I wasn't a sex addict and I couldn't just go and make the feelings go away by indulging in this behavior that was going to take the pain away from me. Which is obviously today I look at that and I think, well, I'm actually grateful that that wasn't my disease. Nobody would ever want to be an addict of any kind. But at the time I remember feeling angry and defiant that I was going to do this thing despite knowing full well that it was not going to help me, just because I was angry at God's world. I was railing against God's reality. I was, at the risk of blaspheming, I was effectively sticking two fingers up at God.
Yeah.
And so it took a lot of work. And obviously the way Step 4 is structured. So there is a big book, Step 4, which a lot of people are very familiar with.
Sure.
There's also a more essay-driven form in the Al-Anon program, which can also be very helpful for people who might find the big book approach a bit austere. But for me, the critical thing to understand about Step 4 is to realize that if I hurt somebody else, I'm just moving that disease along. The disease wins, and to realize this is a bigger thing than just me or somebody else. And so I have a choice. I can go down a dark path or I can choose a higher path.
Yeah.
And the reason I am given that choice is because God loves me. The reason people are given the choice to sin, if you want to put it that way, is because God loves them. Because to be forced to do something virtuous is not virtue and it's not love.
No.
It's only when there is a choice and I choose God's way that is evidence of love. Choice is a prerequisite of love.
It is so interesting. And you put it beautifully. It's so interesting that in that moment, it just feels counterintuitive, right? To us, it feels, I don't know about the way you experience anger and resentments and things, but mine are like a tsunami and they would just take me and ravage me. And it takes, well, a miracle sometimes, to just let them go, right? And of course we have the beautiful spiritual tools that we're given, and we've got outreach with others and all of those things that make up this wonderful program. And, anything outside of the program, that is spiritual. But in that moment, it's the famous saying, isn't it? Everything I've ever let go of has claw marks on it. And that is certainly true for me. And in those moments, it doesn't have that feel. It just feels like I'm dying here, but I need to do the right thing.
Yes, and I've taken that back many times, So today I'm in a very different place to where I was back then, but it wasn't, as you say, it wasn't a smooth ride.
No, not at all. Question 9. Which character defects give you most trouble?
The character defect that I'm working on at the moment is the food. Obviously, I put down the codependency, if you like. I picked up the alcohol. I put down the alcohol. I picked up the food. When I really dig deep into what that is all about, it takes a lot of courage to live in a world where that bad things are going to happen. Bad things happen to everybody. I don't know anyone who's not in I'm in my late 40s now. I don't know anyone who's around my age who hasn't had at least one terrible thing happen to them. If they're lucky, it's only been one.
Yep.
And so you think to yourself, all right, there's a God, and yes, I'm fighting a spiritual battle and all of that. But really, it's and you get to that sort of, I can't even have a nice meal and then, use that to numb my feelings when I want to. So the spiritual, the sort of character defect, if you like, the thing that blocks me from God sometimes is that I take back this faith in God's plan, this trust that everything that is happening is going to work out for the best.
Yeah.
Sometimes I take back that belief.
So self-will, really.
And I have to turn that over again in the Step 3 prayer. So I struggle with that sometimes in the food. But that's to be, as I say, to be alive is to be in that struggle. And that's what it's all about.
If I may share, just from a personal point of view, I find a life where I don't overdo anything, so that I don't over anything hard.
Yes.
Yeah, I think many of us do, I suppose, but as addicts, in one way or another, that is what we do, and we've often talked about it, the whack-a-mole, and if it's not the food, then it's the spending, if it's not the spending, then it's the sex, and if it's not the sex, then it's another substance or whatever it is. A life where for a whole set of, I don't know, however long you want, where I don't overdo any of those things is hard to come by, and just more surrender.
Yes.
Just more surrender, yes. Thank you. Our question 10, what's the best thing recovery has given you?
So when I in that moment when I discovered the sexaholism in my life, I had a career that I was very unhappy with. I hated. I had a relationship that was horrible, that had fallen apart in disease. I was overweight. I was unhappy with just about everything. Today, I'm happy with my career. I found peace. I live my life in a way that brings me joy. I have a relationship today that is a healthy relationship.
Lovely.
Fear of economic insecurity has left me, as the big book promises are coming true in my life. Most importantly of all, I have a relationship with God. I have an explanation for the injustice in the world that doesn't lead me down a path of self-harm and self-destruction.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the greatest gift one could ever be given. No matter what I've lost in my life, no matter where I could look back and pretend that I know better than God and pretend that I can construct a better past for myself, which is an illusion. I can't, but let's say hypothetically, is the price of that worth paying for recovery today? And the answer for me is always yes.
Sure.
To be free of the codependency, to be free of the alcohol, to be free of the bondage and the pain is definitely the greatest gift I could have been given.
Lovely, thank you. Our question 11, what would you say to a newcomer or someone wondering if they're an addict?
I wondered whether I was an alcoholic for a very long time, because I could stop for periods of time and start again. That day when I really got to my bottom, I spoke to a friend in AA and they said, do the questions. There are questions and you can self-diagnose. And when I did the questions and, it came out that I was resounding, yes, I am an alcoholic. I felt an enormous weight lift off my shoulders when I did that. And I realized that doing the questions, self-diagnosing, whether it's the S-Anon questions, there are AA questions, there are questions in almost every program, I think. And really doing that step one for yourself where you decide, nobody can tell you you're an addict, you have to decide.
Yeah.
It's absolutely essential. If there's even the slightest bit of doubt that I am powerless over something, it's not going to work. So, first of all, get clear about whether you are genuinely powerless over something or not. Do the questions, and then when you're absolutely sure, then do the program.
Lovely, thank you. And our last question, our question 12 for today. What do you want your higher power to say to you, quote unquote, at the pearly gates?
Welcome back, is I think what I would, sometimes when I try to get present, if I'm struggling to stay present, I imagine that I'm dead and I'm sitting next to God. And God says, you remember that day when you were in the studio recording a podcast on something and, well, I'm going to send you back to that day so you can live that day all over again. And here I am. And when I think that, I don't worry about what happened yesterday. I don't worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. I can be present in this moment. And so what I would really like my higher power to say to me is welcome back, because I think at the point of birth, we all leave God and come into this spiritual arena of battle. The first book in the sort of Sufi Bible, if you like, the Masnavi, written by Rumi, there's a song called the Song of the Reed. And it's a song about crying and grasping and separation and longing to find our way back to the only one. And so I think Welcome Back would be the thing I'd most like to hear.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Eric. It's taken us a little while to make it work, to find a date, and so on and so forth. And it was so worth the wait. Thank you so much for your share. You were very open and giving and generous. And thank you so much for being my guest today on 12 Steps and 12 Questions.
We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed it and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe. While this pod is based on the 12-Step Recovery Program, it's not officially affiliated with any 12-Step fellowship. 12 Steps and 12 Questions is not substance or behavior specific, it's fully self-supporting and not-for-profit. And you know this next bit. It's not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, and it neither endorses nor opposes any causes.